My husband abandoned me while we were on fertility treatment. That's right. I still tear up thinking about how did I even survive that phase. I got married to my husband in my mid-20s. We were high school buddies. He was pursuing law while I graduated in accounting. I started earning while he was still in college. Right from then, I was helping him financially. I was the one who paid for our dates and his overpriced gadgets. Though he was well off, his dad was clear that he was not going to pay a penny beyond his college tuition, rent, and food. David, my loser husband, used to call his dad a miser, but after getting to know his dad, I realized he was using the right technique to raise his callous son. But by then it was too late and I had already showered my earnings on keeping him happy. David was the only child of his parents. He naturally assumed that his dad's business was going to be his. He didn't take college seriously and dropped out of law school to join his father's business. That's when we got married. He thought since it was his father's business, he would just lounge at the office and enjoy the fruit of his father's hard work. His father tried to instill seriousness in him and teach him business lessons, but David was not ready to learn. He wanted the money to be served on a platter, but his dad got no chills. After enduring him for 2 years, he threw him out of the company and said he could join it only after working for 5 years in other companies. I hated his dad for doing this because we were planning to have a child, but his firing delayed our plan. Back then I used to believe whatever David fed me. He used to paint a picture that he was right while his dad was a miser and tough. In retrospect, I think his dad was right all this while and I was dumb to believe him blindly. After a lot of struggle and some firings, David got a stable job. We started planning for a baby. That's when the real problem began. Months after months went, but we got no luck in seeing the 2 lines on the pregnancy test. After trying naturally for more than 2 years, our doctor suggested we go for IVF. It was a draining process, in all ways, physically, mentally, and of course financially. Our medical bills were already over the roof in 2 years, and then on top of that, opting for an IVF was yet another challenge. We were certain of having at least one child. I should say I was adamant about having a child. David was not passionate like me but didn't deny having a child. He did what he had to do to conceive. When the doctor explained the process of IVF, its success rate, and medical bills, David flipped out. It is quite natural for anyone to flip out given the money you have to put in and the poor success rate. I said I wanted to have a child even if that meant emptying all my savings. David said I was on my own in this because he's not liking his job and would quit any time. He said though he's gonna support me in this, but he's okay even if we don't have a child. I was so blind to become a mother that I didn't see any of the red flags. Thankfully my career was going well amidst all the medical troubles in my life. I liquidated all my savings and started the process. It was a harrowing experience, to say the least. I thought I had already undergone 2 years of treatment with several hormonal injections and endless medicines. I can endure IVF process, how hard it could be. But it was difficult. After a while, I lost the count of injections I had been through. To add to my distress, our first attempt failed. It was so heartbreaking that I didn't get up from the bed for days. The doctor briefed us for the next attempt. Physically and mentally, I was ready to give it a shot again, but finance was a concern. My savings were gone already. I asked David if he could spare something for this. After a lot of to and fro, he gave me $3,000, which was like 5% of the money we needed. I borrowed it from friends and family and went for another attempt. Dang, it failed too. This failure hurt more because now I was in debt and still childless. I gave up on my dreams of becoming a mother. My friend working at a bank suggested medical loans. Without thinking twice, I applied for it and went for the 3rd attempt. You see the desperateness. David was against it. Even my family said it was futile to spend so much money without any guaranteed success, but something in me urged me to go for it. David got hostile to my decision. Ever since we started our IVF process, he has been distant from me. I thought it was due to my crankiness. Hormonal injections come with a hell amount of mood swings and terrible effects on your health. Our sex life became negligible. I thought once we have the baby, everything would fall into place beautifully. I failed to sense that things had already fallen apart. During our 3rd attempt at IVF, after doing his bit, giving his sperm, he said he wanted to go on vacation because he was mentally exhausted. I wanted to punch him on the face for his whining. He couldn't even fathom what I was going through, endless injections, mood swings, sleepless nights, yet he was the one who needed the vacation. With so many things going on in my life, I ignored his tantrums to be dealt with in the last and let him do whatever he wanted. When he came back after his 2 weeks vacation, I rushed to give him the good news. I had conceived. He gave me an awkward hug and was uncomfortable the entire time. I thought he was just overwhelmed. After nudging him, he confessed he wanted to break up with me. The reason? He found comfort in another woman. That 2 weeks trip was not to relax his mind from the IVF stress but to make up his mind for his mistress. He went on the trip with this woman to see if he could live with her, and he found himself happier than ever. He said he never felt that spark with me which he got with her. He was basically cheating on me while I was draining myself with all my might to have his baby. I'm not going to describe how I felt that day. I can't describe it actually. Just imagine your husband saying that he had been sleeping with another woman and want to leave you when you're just 1 week pregnant, and that too in your 3rd attempt at IVF. My body was sore with the months of treatment and now I had to prepare myself for a healthy pregnancy and childbirth. I said, F off, I don't want to deal with you. The next morning when I woke up, he was gone with all his stuff. I called his workplace and got to know he had quit his job months ago. When I called his friends, I got to know that he had borrowed money from them and had been ghosting them. No one knew where he was. There was no trace of him. He abandoned me with an unborn child and piles of debts. It had been 9 years since then. I was blessed with a baby girl. In that vulnerable situation, my Phil came to my rescue. He cleared off David's debts as well as my medical loans and the debts I had incurred during the IVF. He also paid the hospital bills for my delivery. Mill and Phil supported me throughout my pregnancy and even after that. Until I went back to work, Phil sent me money for monthly expenses. After I went back to work, I stopped taking help from Phil. I made decent money to be able to take care of my daughter. Life was going normal until we lost Mill and COVID. Phil was also infected but he was able to fight the virus but Mill succumbed to it. This happened during the first month of COVID. Though Phil had recovered, losing Mill was very tough on him, emotionally. On top of that, there was a lockdown, so he couldn't meet anyone or even go outside. He was giving up on life. It was my turn to pay his debt. I volunteered to move in with him with my daughter. He needed someone at home to be able to talk and express his emotions. My daughter also needed a companion because outdoor activities were shut. So moving with her grandpa was best for all of us. Phil Heath improved considerably. My daughter made memories of her lifetime with her grandpa. Even after the lockdown was lifted, my daughter refused to leave grandpa's house because it had a garden and pool and she loved staying with grandpa. So we continued to live with him. Last year, my company wanted us to work from the office so we had to move back to our home. Commuting from Phil's place was not possible because my workplace was away from his house. Phil was very upset and insisted we stay with him and he would take care of our expenses, but I didn't want to suck onto his money. I promised him that we would visit him every week and we did. Last month, my Phil got terribly sick. He was rushed to the hospital. He passed away in his sleep on the 3rd day of his stay at the hospital. The doctor said that the primary reason for his deteriorating health was his loneliness. During his stay, he had asked his nurse to make several calls to his siblings and other family members but no one turned up. Even his call history suggested that he called many of his relatives but hardly anyone came to meet him. I found his diary in his bedroom drawer. He wrote how he was so grateful to me for staying with him and how much he enjoyed playing with my daughter. After his death, I called up all the relatives to inform them about Phil's demise and surprisingly everyone showed their interest in attending the funeral. It's funny because no one showed up when he was alive. During his funeral, David showed up. God knows how he came to know about Phil's demise. He must have been in touch with some relatives who gave him the news. After the funeral, we got a call from Phil's lawyer to visit his office for the will disclosure. It goes without saying that all of Phil's wealth would have gone to David since he was the only son. I told the lawyer that I don't want to be there since I had no business in that will reading thing. He insisted that I be present because it was important. I thought Phil left something for my daughter, but who would have thought that he gave most of his wealth to me? Everyone, including me, was shocked when the lawyer read the will. All his liquid asset, which was worth more than $1 million, was willed to me. He gave the house to my daughter, but she can claim the possession only after she turns 21. Until then it would be with me. There were 2 additional clauses that my daughter could not sell the house until I gave my consent. Second, David cannot overturn his will, but if I wanted I can give him the portion of the inheritance as per my wish. This was like a stab in David's chest. He sat there with his head buried in his palms. His relatives were also disappointed. Many unwanted people also showed up just with the hope that Phil might have left something for them since he didn't have many children. After Phil's demise, David moved in with his stuff to live in that house. He has turned bitter after the will got disclosed, but he has not vacated the house. I thought he would move out of his own since the house is no longer his, but 1 month has passed and he shows no mood of leaving the house. He has also been blaming me for ripping off his inheritance. He is saying that I manipulated Phil to change the will to my name. Yesterday, I called him and asked him to vacate the house because it is no longer his. He started yelling at me that he was not going to leave the house and would contest the will and rip me off everything. David's relatives are calling me bitch. Even some of my friends and relatives are making me feel guilty about accepting Phil's property because it was originally supposed to be David's. They're saying that just because he abandoned me, he cannot lose his chance of having the inheritance. I don't know what to do. Any fresh perspective is welcomed. Update 1. Thanks for the outpouring love and support. You guys were right in saying that my Phil gave me an opportunity to take my revenge on David. He must have definitely known that his loser son would show up at his funeral to claim his inheritance, and that's why he made an uncontested will. I was never interested in Phil's money, but Phil gave me an opportunity to extract my revenge on David, and I'm not gonna miss that. I cannot let David waste the hard-earned money of his dad. As I mentioned that David was still living at Phil's house, I asked Phil's lawyer to send an eviction notice to David. He lost his shit when he got the notice. He thought I would come to fight with him directly and he would chase me out. Instead, I chose a legal route and made him helpless. The notice had 1 week's time to vacate the house. He resisted it until the last day when the lawyer threatened to call cops on him as per the eviction notice. In that 1 week, he did everything to break me down and force me to give away the inheritance to me. From threat calls to showing up at my door and vandalizing my car, he did everything, but I didn't lose my composure. I never answered his calls. If he called from an unknown number, I would hang up or remain silent and record it. If he showed up at my door, I would never answer the doorbell. I have a camera installed at my door and I meticulously save the recordings of all his nuisances to be used against him. He vacated the house, but he filed a case to overturn the will. I don't understand the law jargon, but my lawyer said David's case was weak and there's no way he could win in the courtroom. My lawyer cautioned me that the only way David could get the inheritance was by manipulating me, so I had to be strong. Meanwhile, I also sent divorce papers to David. He couldn't believe that I wanted to be separated from him. He said he didn't want to be separated from me, that's why he never divorced me. Really? As far as I remember, you moron abandoned me 9 years ago. A piece of paper doesn't define togetherness or separateness. We're separated for 9 years. Divorce would just make it official. The divorce proceedings haven't moved ahead yet. But we are in a tussle for the inheritance. David has crossed all boundaries of modesty. He was accusing me of brainwashing and forcing Phil to write his will in my favor. This allegation was still okay to take. But he took the bitterness too far and alleged that his father was on drugs and was not in his senses while modifying the will. David was the heir of Phil's first draft of the will. It was only he abandoned us. Phil updated the will and gave me a portion of his wealth, but the majority was still with David. But when we started living with him in his final days, Phil made the final version and divided his wealth between me and my daughter. David played his card based on the timeline of updates. His lawyer made a point that I had manipulated Phil to change everything in my name. This has happened in the very first hearing. My lawyer gave me a heads up that it might get far uglier with each hearing, so I have to be stronger. I don't know what else is about to come, but I'm certain I can endure it. Update 2. Hello all, it's been a long time since I updated it. People who were following my post, I'm not sure if they are still interested in reading this thread. As the case was critical and ongoing, I was instructed by my lawyer not to reveal any information publicly. It might have been used against me. Now that everything is over, I'm writing this post, but I'll still refrain from going into the details. So, it was a long and tiring legal battle. With each hearing, the matter got ugly with fresh allegations coming in. It reached its peak when his lawyer alleged that I was having an affair with my Phil and blackmailed him to write his will in my name. I was strong until then, but hearing such nonsense trembled my soul. I broke down in front of the judge. I narrated all the pains I have been inflicted by David, but this allegation was too outrageous to handle. Forget about me. How could David outrage the modesty of the dead who was no one but his father? How could someone stoop so low just for the sake of money? I realized that people are powerless in front of money and lose all their ethics, morals, values, and everything. David is the best example to prove this point. He went as far as to discuss his dead father's sex life in a courtroom. My Phil was a father to me. It makes me throw up whenever I think about David's allegation. The worst part is people enjoy feeding on this kind of filthy gossip. There was no evidence to this allegation, yet his relatives started calling me Phil's mistress. Could anyone imagine the trauma I have been through? They got date after date to provide evidence of this allegation, but they could not. My lawyer said it was alleged just to mentally tear me up. They were even successful to an extent. I was about to give up. Towards the end, it became so unbearable that I told my lawyer to give away everything to David. I earned enough for myself and my daughter. But my daughter stood by me and she insisted that we stay strong and fight for Grandpa's sake. My lawyer was also confident that we would get through this because David had no evidence for his claim. They were just playing mind games to break me. David even played dirty in the divorce case. He said he left me because I tortured him mentally and blamed him for not conceiving. He said I was pressuring him for money for IVF while he was against having a baby. He complicated the case by alleging that I had manipulated Phil to throw David out of his company and I had control over Phil because we were involved physically. It was again all stories made in thin air. When I asked my lawyer to start the divorce proceedings simultaneously with the property case, he cautioned me to wait and take one at a time, but I was adamant about ending everything together. He said David would make both cases complicated, but I was stupid to underestimate him and think how hard it can get. It indeed was hard, very hard. It took 2 years to settle both the legal battles. David lost both of them. The judge bashed him and his lawyer for unnecessarily pouring new allegations without any evidence. Phil was smart to add a clause that prevented his legal heir, David, to overturn the will. For the divorce case, I had enough evidence to prove that he abandoned me for his mistress. The divorce is final now and I have no business to do with David. He vanished after losing both cases. I heard David had borrowed money from his loser relatives for the legal battles, promising them a portion of wealth. Sadly, they have put a bet on a losing horse who fled after the loss. Now they are trying to act sweet with me, but I have blocked all of them. I have recruited security for Phil's house. Don't want to deal with any trespassers again. As the place is far from my office and my daughter's school, we might not move into that house in the near future, but we are not going to leave it vacant. My friends suggested renting the house for social events, but we have to make some structural changes. I'm yet to think about it. It might seem like a happy ending, but I can't feel that happiness yet. It was a difficult time. David broke me down so badly that I had to seek therapy. I don't know if ever my life would be easy. I don't remember having a good day for a long time. I know I sound sadist. Yes, I need a few more sessions of therapy. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Discovered my wife had an abortion after getting pregnant by her coworker. So, I kicked her out and now I'm fighting for full custody of our daughters. So, my wife and I have been married for 11 years, and we have 2 daughters aged 10 and 11. The other day, I was online taking care of some minor medical stuff when I noticed some appointments on the list that I wasn't aware of appointments for my wife. I saw one for her being 6 weeks pregnant and another for her having an abortion. I was completely taken aback by this discovery. Later that night, I decided to ask her about it. I wanted to know if she had any plans to tell me about the pregnancy. Our conversation became a bit intense, with her asking me questions and me trying to understand why she hadn't shared this with me earlier. I mentioned the abortion as well, and we went back and forth discussing how I found out and what led to this situation. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even considering the possibility of someone else being involved. You see, I had a vasectomy a few years back, and I had a follow-up appointment to confirm that the procedure was successful. Of course, I'm aware that vasectomies can sometimes reverse themselves, but it didn't immediately cross my mind. As the story continues, I'm doing my best to be supportive, even though I'm not particularly upset about anything except for the fact that she kept this from me. Then, she drops a bombshell. She confesses that she was afraid to tell me about the pregnancy because she wasn't sure if I was the father. It turns out she's been having unprotected sex with a coworker in the back of her car. She works nights, for the past 6 months. I was completely blindsided by this affair. According to her, she regrets the decision to have an abortion, which happened back in early November. Shockingly, she admits that she continued to have sex with him, even a couple of times in February. Right now, she's an emotional mess, and although I really want to comfort her, I'm trying to stay strong. It's hard to come to terms with what she's done. She's the one who made these choices, and now she has to face the consequences. I want to make it clear that I don't blame myself for what happened. It was her decision, her actions, and her mistakes. Even though this all unfolded just earlier this week, I'm feeling incredibly torn up inside. I still love this woman deeply, but I can't overlook or forgive what she did. Our 11 years of building a relationship and trust seem to have crumbled in a single day. My priority now is her well-being, but I've come to the realization that I can't be the one to provide that for her anymore. I've already expressed my desire for a separation, and I've asked her to move out. I live in a home that I rent from my mother, and part of the agreement is that I also help take care of my grandmother who lives with us. It would be incredibly awkward for her to stay here once the rest of the family knows about the situation. However, even if my grandmother didn't live with us, I would still ask her to move out. My mindset is that I didn't cheat, so why should I be the one to uproot my life? It's a difficult and emotional situation, but I know I need to prioritize my own well-being and make decisions that are right for me moving forward. I've reached out to a lawyer and I'm in the process of gathering information for the separation papers. I've also taken the responsible step of getting tested for STDs, and fortunately, the results so far have been clean. I haven't told my children about the situation yet. My soon-to-be ex wanted to downplay it as just a breakup, but I firmly believe they need to understand the seriousness of a marriage, so I plan to be honest with them about the fact that their mother had a boyfriend. She started crying and told me to not tell anyone about the reason for the breakup and especially not the kids. Her words were falling to deaf ears. I was the one who was supposed to be crying and asking her why she did what she did, but here I am making calls to my immediate family telling them that me and my wife are splitting up and the reason is because she cheated on me, and she is pregnant with another man's child. I still haven't met this man and I have no intentions to meet him either. He can take my ex and leave my daughters to me. My mother-in-law called me and apologized on behalf of my ex and told her that she is stupid for doing this to such a good man. I didn't know what to say either. I loved her family dearly and they picked my side too. They said that they completely cut off ties with her, and that she deserves to suffer the consequences. I later kicked her out the house and said I will be taking full custody of the kids and now she can go live with that coworker of hers. She didn't utter a word after that. This whole experience has been incredibly tough on me. I feel like I'm barely holding myself together, especially today. I'm trying to maintain a strong front in front of my daughters, but there are moments when I have to step away to collect myself. It's been a few weeks since I last heard from my ex, and things have been going pretty well for me. The custody case for my 2 girls seems to be in my favor, and they are coping with everything remarkably well. I'm relieved that I can finally find happiness in the company of just my girls and myself.